Good afternoon, everybody. This is Steve Fletcher with a trumpet for my people. Today is September 3rd, 2021, and I have a couple more things that I need to go over with you before the Feast of Trumpets in just a few days. And in this message right now, I want to address those that are changing the calendar to October Feast of Trumpets. Okay? This message is debunking the October Feast of Trumpets date. Debunking the October Feast of Trumpets date. Now, the big question here that most people have as we are coming up upon what we are talking about, the Feast of Trumpets, in just a few days, and then we have a lot of comments from people who are saying, well, what about those who are saying that the Feast of Trumpets is actually in October? Okay. How can the Feast of Trumpets be before the fall equinox? Okay. How can the Feast of Trumpets be before the fall equinox? Okay. All right, I want to take you back to the tetrad of 2014 and 2015, and I want to consider the final blood moon of the tetrad, okay? The final blood moon, which was not only the final blood moon of the tetrad, it was a super moon, and it was over Jerusalem, September 28th, 2015. A super blood moon over Israel on Tabernacle, September 28th, 2015. How can the Feast of Trumpets be before the fall equinox, you say? Okay. See, I am showing you through history, and I'm showing you through all of the actual events and signs why we are watching the Feast of Trumpets on September 6th and September 7th. How can the Feast of Trumpets fall before the fall equinox? Okay. Look at the blood moon of September 28th, 2015. Okay. What is interesting about this? What is special about this? Okay. Feast of Tabernacles, the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles, because it's the blood moon of the 14th day of the month, and the Tabernacles is going to begin on the 29th of September, and we have a super blood moon over Israel. Well, what day was the Feast of Trumpets in 2015? It was the 13th of September. There was a solar eclipse on the 13th of September in 2015. It was not a total solar eclipse, but there was a solar eclipse marking the Feast of Trumpets on September 13th. Okay. Now, okay, so here we have these people saying the Feast of Trumpets cannot begin before the fall equinox. Okay. So what are we going to do with this amazing sign that took place in 2014, 2015? So now the blood moon tetrad does not exist. So this was not the date. This blood moon was not on Tabernacles. Okay? Because if we're going to go and try and change the dates of what we're watching this year, then we need to go back in throughout history and look at all the times that the signs have come on the dates of the Hebrew calendar, and we need to examine, okay, not only just one year and say this is why 2021 there's a big mistake. 2021 Israel got it wrong, okay? Look at since 1945. I did the homework for you guys. Okay, I went back and I did the homework. I actually walked this through to see, okay, how it all plays out throughout history. And I went to the first day of Nisan every year on the Hebrew calendar back to 1945. First of Nisan. Now this is, I have listed here every time the year begins before the spring equinox. Okay. 1945, 1953, 1956, 1961, 1964, 1972, 1975, 1983. You get the point, okay? Do I need to read through all of these? There's 16 times. Okay? 16 times that the year has begun before the spring equinox. Okay. Why does this happen? How can this happen in Israel? Well, come on, guys. I mean, number one, Israel does not go by a solar calendar. They do not follow a solar calendar. The equinox to them is not the marker. Okay? Because they're on a lunar calendar. They need to follow out the lunar cycles. And they have a system within Israel every year. Okay, their new year changes every year. The date of their year changes every year, comparative from the Hebrew to the Gregorian calendar, because a lunar cycle does not line up with a solar cycle. A lunar calendar does not line up with a solar calendar. So that's why there is a difference every year. I mean, you look at the first of Nisan in 1945, it's 15th of March. In 1953, it's the 17th of March. In 1956, it's the 13th of March. Every year it changes. Okay? Because they are not going by a solar calendar. They go by a lunar calendar. Okay? So, if anyone is saying that the Feast of Trumpets must begin after the fall equinox, then we can throw out the blood moon tetrad, and we might as well just throw out all of Israel's history, because this is all written in the books. Their history has been written down, and you can not only follow their history according to the Gregorian calendar, but they have their own system of looking up all of the dates in history, how this has all happened. Okay? I mean, if you go back to the year 70 AD, the fall of Jerusalem was on the 4th of August, which was the 9th of Av. Okay? Now, they have their system to follow, that they have been following, that they have followed for 2,000 years, and this is the calendar of Israel, okay? Whether you like it or not, whether you understand it or not, this is the calendar of Israel. Okay, and it's not for us to go and be changing, okay, based on our own understanding. And those that say the year cannot begin before the spring equinox, that's a bunch of baloney. Okay, it's a bunch of baloney. Because 16 times in their history, since only the year 1945, this has been the case, and this is the way their history has been written up until now, and this is the way their history will continue to be written. Okay? All right? What is the day of the Feast of Trumpets in Israel this year? Okay? Just look it up on the internet. Go, what is the date of the Feast of Trumpets 2021? Nowhere are you going to find that it is in October. They do not follow a solar cycle that says the Feast of Trumpets must happen after the fall equinox. So in all of Israel and all of the Jews worldwide are following the Hebrew calendar, and everybody knows that the Feast of Trumpets is September 6th through 8th of 2021. Okay? Just look it up. When is the Feast of Trumpets 2021? That's what we need to go by. And based on their history, we cannot go back and change their history. And if we did go back and change their history, then we would have to even go back to 2015 and say, this is not Rosh Hashanah because it's before, okay, it's before the fall equinox. How could this happen? This cannot happen. Let's go back a month. This blood moon means nothing. So we no longer have a blood moon on Tabernacles, and we no longer have a tetrad. See the problem we have here? By people going back and changing the calendar, Israel goes by their own calendar. And the confusion does not lie in Israel's calendar. The confusion lies in those that are trying to change the calendar, which God does not change the times and the laws. The spirit of Antichrist will change the times and the laws. Let me just say it that way. And there's people that are bringing confusion to the body of Christ. Okay? This is a confusion issue that is being brought. God is not the author of confusion. He's the author of peace, as in all the churches of the saints. So if there's confusion out there, okay, it's not God's confusion. God is not causing the confusion. God has made everything very, very clear for us. He's given us history. He's given us time. We have the opportunity to understand why Israel has their calendar, how Israel's calendar works, why they add a 13th month when needed, why they allow their calendar to begin before the spring equinox, which happens periodically, because it has to line up over time with the time frame of the spring. The spring feast being in that general vicinity of March and April, okay? Because if they never went back and added a 13th month, then you'd end up having Passover back in October. And, if you just let the calendar run, there's a 5-day difference every year on the Hebrew calendar to the solar calendar. Their calendar is 360 days. The solar calendar is 365 days. So if they just let it run every year, okay, then there's going to be a huge discrepancy in that. They have it all worked out within their own system the way they do it. Now, if we go to the Hebrew calendar, okay, you go to the Hebrew calendar and you want to know, I want to know the date on the Hebrew calendar, because that's what matters. That's what matters. Okay, I went in and I looked up what is the day of the Feast of Trumpets in 2021 in Israel. Rosh Hashanah in Israel, September 6th through 8th. That's it. Okay? There is no other worrying about the equinoxes. Israel doesn't worry about the equinoxes because they have a lunar calendar. Okay? And this is a very important issue. And that's why I'm overly stressing my point here. Okay? And there's a lot of confusion going on right now. And this confusion is not of God. And people need to be understanding, if God is going to move on the Feast of Trumpets, let's say, okay, God is going to move on the Feast of Trumpets, right? But everybody's got in their mind, October. Okay, so nobody's preparing now. Nobody's got their heart set or mind set on the day that's coming up. And February 6th, 7th, and 8th comes. Feast of Trumpets. You're in a world of trouble if you're looking at October when you should be looking at September. I mean, these are God's appointed times. I don't know who people think they are to say they can go messing with God's appointed times. This is a huge issue. The calendar of Israel. I mean, you go back to 1945 and you have everything written in stone of where these dates fall, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that 16 years of their calendar started before the spring equinox. Okay? That's the way it is. That's the history that's been written. And now we're going to say that we can just go back and change, because if you're going to change 2021, go back and rewrite the book. You're going to change 2021? Go back and rewrite the book. The whole history of Israel, rewrite it all based on your own understanding. Okay? And then see who's going to buy your book. Nobody's going to buy your book. Okay? Because there's no continuity to what you're saying. There's no continuity at all to what you're saying. Okay? This is a very serious issue, and this is why I'm stressing very importantly Rosh Hashanah in Israel, September 6th through 8th, 2021. And the blood moon of September 28th, 2015 confirms it. Rosh Hashanah was on September 13th, 2015. Okay? So that is why Feast of Trumpets can be, and many times is, before the fall equinox. Okay? I've given you the history of Nisan 1 since 1945. You want to go back and look at Tishri 1 since 1945? You can do that. Okay? Get your own understanding. Search the scriptures. Search history. Search the knowledge of how Israel's calendar works. Okay? Because it's not a Gregorian calendar. This is the Hebrew calendar. This is God's time clock. This is how we can understand the signs and the times, the appointed times of God. Okay? So this is what I wanted to share with you. God is not the author of confusion. There should be no confusion. And those who are causing confusion are not of God. That's all I have to say about that. Feast of Trumpets, September 6th through 8th, 2021. Prepare now. We are just days away from this extremely important and highest watch appointed time on God's calendar. I pray you're blessed. This is Steve Fletcher with the trumpet for my people, the sign of his coming revealed.